For more, the veteran anti-apartheid activist and former British MP Lord Hain joins us now via Zoom. A very good morning to you, Lord Peter Hain. What does this mean in terms of Britain becoming the first Western country to impose penalties on a consultancy for its role in state capture in South Africa?
It's very significant because I felt strongly that companies like Bain and Co, and there are others, KPMG, McKinsey, who have been involved in the whole corruption state capture scandal under former President Zuma, I felt that they ought to face consequences abroad as well. And they're headquartered in Bain's case here in London, and they should receive the consequences of their unlawful behavior. In Bain's case, the Zondo Commission said they acted unlawfully and referred it for prosecution because of the way that they dismembered the South African Revenue Service, SARS. And yet they continue to practice in London, in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere in the world as if nothing had happened in South Africa, as if none of this corrupt, grubby behavior had happened at all. So that was my purpose, and I'm pleased and a little surprised, but in a welcome way, that the British government has acceded to my request. And I went to see the Cabinet Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg a few weeks ago with the brave Bain whistleblower Athol Williams and laid out the evidence. And we had this announcement yesterday. So that's good news. I now want to see the American government under President Biden following suit, the Chinese government, the Indian government, the UAE government, all of whom have been involved in seeing the state capture episode happen, take similar action against all of these international brand names like Bain and others who made the money laundering and the corruption possible by working with former President Zuma in Bain's case directly, and also the other corporates also involved in this.
Give us a sense of the hierarchy, just in terms of the British cabinet, because this instruction coming from Jacob Rees-Mogg that you say you went through to see, who's the cabinet office minister. How, just in terms of hierarchy, how enforceable is this sanction on Bain and Company coming from his office?
Well, the Cabinet Office is the kind of, under the Prime Minister, the coordinating department for all government departments. So it's a very significant move. It applies immediately to Cabinet Office procurement contracts, and Bain and Company had one only recently over Brexit with the Cabinet Office, but they are sending guidance out to other government departments. So that will apply presumably right across the board, because it would be odd if, let's say, the health department didn't apply the same policy as the Cabinet Office has recommended. So it's very significant. It would apply right across the board. The Jacob Rees-Mogg obviously is the Cabinet Office minister, and other cabinet ministers in the government presumably will follow his advice, as on these kind of matters they do on other policies.
So this would be the office where procurement for government flows from, so quite significant. Does it matter that it has a time limitation? These sanctions are just for about 3 years.
No, because the Zondo Commission recommended that Bain be prosecuted. That will take time, and I think it's a very sensible decision. They're not saying Bain will be penalized forever, but let's see where this prosecutorial process in South Africa goes. Because remember, the Zondo Commission not only found that Bain had acted unlawfully, that was its exact phrase, but also said that it should be prosecuted. And although attention is rightly focused on Bain's role working hand in glove with former President Zuma and the Gupta brothers to effectively turn the tax collecting agency of South Africa from one of the best in the world into one that is now has been effectively dismembered and rendered much less effective in order to allow tax fraudsters to get away with things as former President Zuma wanted to happen, many of them his cronies. So it's very important that attention is not just focused on what Bain did over SARS, but it had around £100 million worth. That's many, many more hundreds of millions, indeed over £1 billion worth of rent in this case, of contracts right across the board with Eskom and SAA and all the rest of the state-owned enterprises. And we know that there was corruption in every one of these. So we wait to see what happens on Zondo's recognition in respect of Bain's other activities. And this should be an example to all the other global corporates that I have tried to focus on these last 5 years or so in exposing through the British Parliament and putting pressure on their operations here in London. It should be a lesson to them that if you act unlawfully or corruptly, or if you act unethically in a country like South Africa that may seem far away from London or Washington, D.C. or Delhi or Beijing or Dubai or Hong Kong, then there will be consequences for you. Because otherwise state capture is going to happen again in South Africa. We know that corruption is still very evident at all levels of government, from national to municipal and city level. It's going to happen again with the complicity of these global corporates earning big fees. So I hope that the other corporates will take heed of this and start acting ethically instead of corruptly.
Lord Hain, when you appeared before the State Capture Commission, you, just to reiterate what you've just said, were not specifically appearing about Bain, but about a whole global financial system that's undermining governments. Do you think this is enough, what how the British government is sanctioning Bain and Company, or can further steps be taken to ensure that this doesn't happen again, one, and two, that other consulting firms that are going out seeking business from governments strive to remain ethical and follow process?
Well, it's a start. It's never happened before. None of these global corporates has been punished elsewhere in the world for what they did in South Africa. So it's a start. And I think that's important. I hope that the US government will follow suit because, of course, Bain was launched. It's an American company by origin, even though it's global now, with offices in London and elsewhere across the world. I hope that the US government under President Biden will study closely what the British government has done and do the same. And that other governments will act equally, because in the end, although governments like Britain's and like the Americans and elsewhere say they're against corruption and against money laundering, and they have legislation in the UK's case recently upgraded to try and deal with it, if they're not actually confronting in a coordinated way the way these global corporates behave, then it'll continue. Trillions of dollars are money laundered around the world every year. Trillions of dollars. That's a massive amount. And the governments have got to start acting, and not just talking, but acting. And they've got to coordinate, because this involves not just London and Washington, it involves Delhi, it involves Beijing, it involves Hong Kong. Dubai is a money laundering center. A lot of the Gupta's money went through Dubai and Hong Kong as well. So there's got to be coordination between the US, the UK, the European governments, the Chinese government, the Indian government, the UAE government, to stop this happening. They could do it, but they haven't acted with the sufficient force up to now. And let's hope that this step by the British government, which I welcome and commend, is just the first step of many that need to be taken.
How can the South African government keep momentum on this goodwill, just in terms of implementing the suggestions of the Zondo Commission, and perhaps just trying to put systems in place to ensure that governance is followed?
Well, there's too much corruption, even under President Zuma, President Ramaphosa, who says he's cleaning things up and as opposed to it. But I think what should happen immediately, and there's lots of process in South Africa, I observe, like the Zondo Commission, very important new policy statements and all the rest of it. What you need is action. as I think many South African citizens of all colours have said, they want to see people wearing orange overalls who've been responsible for all of this. And that hasn't really happened in the way that it should. Let's hope that the prosecutorial process recommended by Zondo for Bain is speedily followed up, because that would really send the alarm bells ringing in the corporate headquarters of all of these international companies that take pride in their reputation abroad, but took part in the state capture scandal. It would really jog them into realizing that they've got to change their ways.
What do you mean when you say corruption continues unabated?
Well, we know almost every day there seems to be corruption at local, municipal, city and national government level. It's exposed almost every other day in the media. So it's not on the scale that it was under former President Zuma and the Gupta brothers, and there's some important arrests have been made for those responsible. But, I think most South African citizens, and I see it reported all the time, want to see action. They want to see people brought into court, not having clever lawyers expensively paid to stop them getting into court, and delays in court appearances because of all sorts of technicalities. I think that what South Africa wants to do, and I think this is important because you want global companies investing in the country. You want their investment. South Africa needs to attract much, much more foreign investment. And for that to happen, foreign investors need to be much more confident than they are and have been for the last 10 years or so in the country's future.
Do you feel vindicated just in terms of the time and effort you've put into the activism and highlighting these corruption activities taking place in South Africa?
Well, lots of people have been involved in doing this. Brave investigative reporters for organizations like Gamabungani and so on. They have done a lot of the spade work. I've just, in a way, been able to focus on the global end of it. So I don't know about vindicated, but I'm pleased that at least this first step has been taken by the British government suspending Bain from public contracts, because that is a very, very important signal to businesses across the world that they've got to behave ethically when they operate in countries like South Africa, as we want them to do. I think there's something else that I just want to add, and that is that I took Athol Williams, the brave South African whistleblower who worked for Bain for a quarter of a century. I took him with me to see Cabinet Office Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg. And Athol has been hounded out of the country, treated terribly by Bain, financially penalized, intimidated, hasn't felt safe at all. And frankly, that's a very bad stain on South Africa's reputation. You should be celebrating and praising whistleblowers who blow the whistle on corruption, not hounding them so they don't feel safe in their own country. And the business community needs to stand up and defend Athol Williams and say he's an example of what we want. We want good business models for younger people coming into the business community. And instead of hounding somebody, he should be praised.
And just finally, what type of conversations are taking place? I want to ask you two questions in one. What kind of conversations are taking place in the UK, just in terms of the latest revelations in South Africa about the Phala Phala farm scandal? And I also want to ask you about how Britain is doing following the political upheaval in Parliament against Prime Minister Johnson.
Well, on respect to the Phala Phala scandal, it's got virtually no attention in the British political class and media. But on the recent upheavals in the British Parliament, clearly we're seeing the working out of that in this contest between two former cabinet ministers, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. And it looks like the next Prime Minister is going to be Liz Truss. In which case, I think there are going to be lots of problems ahead for the country. It's more of the same, more of Boris Johnson, and we know where that took Britain. into its lowest standing internationally that it's had, if not ever, then in living memory. Its reputation badly damaged by Boris Johnson. I hope that Liz Truss will do better than him, but what she said so far in breaking an international treaty like on the Northern Ireland Protocol doesn't bode very well, frankly.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. That was veteran anti-apartheid activist and former British MP Lord Hain. We have reached out to Bain & Company to respond to these latest developments. We're waiting for them to get back to us.